We've all thought about where we'd hide during a zombie apocalypse, and islands usually come up as the perfect answer. So I've decided to break down exactly why islands won't save you from zombies. From underwater walkers to you being your own biggest enemy, these are the brutal realities nobody talks about. Starting with the one problem that makes every other strategy pointless: the arrival problem. Zombies probably don't need to breathe. That single fact destroys the entire island strategy before you even pack a boat. Standard zombie physiology operates without oxygen exchange, meaning drowning is impossible. A zombie that falls into water doesn't die. It sinks to the bottom and keeps walking. Ocean currents don't stop it. Water pressure doesn't crush it. Marine life can't consume undead flesh fast enough to matter. The zombie walks along the seafloor until topography slopes upward and it beaches somewhere random. The Atlantic Ocean between Europe and North America? That's just a 4,000-mile walk. Slow zombies move roughly 1 mile per hour in optimal conditions. Underwater currents can push them faster. You're looking at 4 to 6 months of travel time. Every zombie that enters the ocean becomes a delayed delivery threat to every coastline on Earth. The numbers make it worse. Global zombie outbreak means millions entering water from every coastal city. New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Mumbai, all dumping infected into the ocean as panicked evacuations fail. Those millions don't disappear. They spread across ocean floors following currents and thermal layers. The Gulf Stream carries East Coast zombies toward Europe. The Kuroshio Current drags Asian zombies toward North America. Within a year of outbreak, every major ocean current becomes a zombie conveyor belt delivering undead to shores thousands of miles from origin points. Your remote Pacific island isn't safe. It's just downstream from somewhere that already fell. Floating compounds the issue. Decomposition creates gas buildup in torsos. Zombies with enough internal decay become buoyant and drift on the surface. Ocean currents move surface objects faster than seafloor walkers. A floating zombie can cross the Atlantic in weeks instead of months. Storm systems push flotillas of undead like disgusting rafts. Your island's beach could wake up one morning covered in barnacle-crusted corpses that drifted 2,000 miles overnight during a hurricane. You can't predict it. You can't stop it. The ocean delivers zombies like packages you never ordered and absolutely don't want. But that assumes zombies need to accidentally reach you. Human traffic guarantees they arrive on purpose. The refugee vector. Every island within boat range of population centers gets swarmed by desperate survivors within days of outbreak. Coastal evacuations send thousands fleeing to any land separated by water. Those refugees carry 3 problems. First, they consume resources faster than islands can replenish them. Second, they bring social conflict from mainland power structures and panic. Third, some of them are infected and don't know it yet. Asymptomatic carriers break every quarantine system. Incubation periods vary by zombie virus type, but most documented strains allow 6 to 48 hours between infection and turn. A person bitten on the mainland can board a boat feeling fine, pass every visual inspection, and turn mid-voyage or after landing. One infected refugee in a population of 500 creates outbreak conditions within enclosed spaces. Islands don't have the medical infrastructure to handle proper quarantine protocols. No isolation wards, no testing equipment, no way to verify clean status except waiting to see who turns. By the time you identify carriers, they've already spread infection through shared resources and close quarters. The ethics make it impossible. Turning away refugees requires shooting desperate people trying to land on your beaches. Every boat you sink might contain families, children, injured survivors who aren't infected. Can you live with machine-gunning civilians begging for help? Most groups can't. They let boats land, implement soft quarantines, and hope screening catches problems. It never does. Soft quarantines fail because enforcement requires manpower and weapons you're already short on. Hard quarantines require shooting your own people when they break rules, which fractures leadership and causes internal conflict. Either way, refugees introduce infection faster than you can contain it. Population density accelerates the problem. Islands have finite space. 100 refugees doubling your population changes everything. Resource consumption spikes. Living quarters become cramped. Sanitation systems overflow. Interpersonal conflict rises with proximity. Now add infection to that pressure cooker. One person turns in a packed sleeping area at night. They bite 3 people before anyone reacts. Those 3 are now infected but still mobile. They panic, run, spread into different areas before turning. Your outbreak goes from 1 case to 12 in 6 hours. The island's confined geography that seemed protective now traps everyone in close contact with infection. You can't run. You can't create distance. You're stuck in zombie proximity until someone restores order, or everyone dies. The math is unforgiving. Islands that accept refugees fail within 2 weeks on average. Islands that reject refugees face different failure modes but similar timelines. Because even if you shoot every approaching boat, you're still vulnerable to the next problem: resource scarcity. Islands are resource deserts pretending to be paradises. The tropical fantasy of endless fish and coconuts dies when you actually calculate survival needs. A single adult requires 2,000 calories daily. Coconuts provide 140 calories each. You'd need 14 coconuts per person per day just for baseline energy, ignoring protein and micronutrients. Where are you getting 14 coconuts per person when the island has finite palm trees that fruit seasonally? Fishing helps, but requires equipment, knowledge, time, and calm seas. Storm seasons shut down fishing for weeks. Equipment breaks. Fuel for boats runs out. Even perfect conditions only support populations up to ecological carrying capacity, which for most islands is far below the refugee numbers arriving. Medical supplies vanish faster. Antibiotics expire. Pain medication runs out. Insulin requires refrigeration that needs electricity that needs fuel. Chronic conditions become death sentences. Diabetes kills in weeks without insulin. Infections from minor cuts become septic without antibiotics. Childbirth becomes potentially fatal without surgical capability. Your population attrition from medical scarcity rivals zombie casualties. Ammunition defines survival timelines. Most survivor groups arrive with whatever guns they carried during evacuation. Civilian firearms with maybe 200 rounds per weapon. That sounds substantial until combat mathematics apply. Accurate headshots on moving zombies require 3 to 5 rounds per kill for trained shooters, more for civilians. 200 rounds equals 40 to 70 zombie kills if you're exceptionally skilled and lucky. A single beach landing of 50 zombies burns through one person's entire ammunition supply. Now multiply by every person on the island who needs to defend a perimeter. Your ammunition lasts weeks at best. After that, you're fighting zombies with melee weapons and homemade spears, which drastically increases casualty rates and exhaustion. Fuel controls everything: generators for electricity, boats for fishing and supply runs, vehicles for island mobility, chainsaws for clearing and construction. Every machine that makes survival easier requires gasoline or diesel that you can't produce. Islands don't have refineries. You brought what you carried, and it degrades over time. Gasoline goes bad in 6 months without stabilizers. Diesel lasts longer but still degrades. After your initial supply depletes, you're pre-industrial. No refrigeration, no power tools, no motorized transport. Your efficiency drops by orders of magnitude right when you need it most. These scarcities force mainland supply runs. Someone has to risk returning to zombie-infested coasts to raid pharmacies, fuel depots, and warehouses. Every supply run exposes your team to infection and casualties. Every run brings back potential carriers. Every run depletes your limited boat fuel faster. You're trapped in a death spiral where survival requires risks that introduce the threats you're trying to avoid. The island doesn't protect you. It just concentrates the timeline until scarcity forces fatal choices. But resources matter less if your population destroys itself first. Social collapse. Humans don't cooperate well under stress. Islands amplify every social friction point by removing escape valves. On mainland survival scenarios, disagreeing groups can split and move to separate locations. Islands don't allow that. You're stuck with everyone else in fixed geography. That proximity guarantees conflict escalation. Leadership disputes start immediately. Who's in charge? The person who organized the boat evacuation? The person with military experience? The person who owned the island before outbreak? Every leadership model has advocates and opponents. Democratic systems require time and structure that emergencies don't allow. Autocratic systems breed resentment. Consensus models collapse when urgent decisions need immediate action. The leadership vacuum creates faction formation. Groups coalesce around charismatic individuals or shared backgrounds. Military veterans versus civilians. Families versus singles. Resource contributors versus consumers. These factions compete for influence and material goods, creating internal conflicts that bleed attention and manpower away from external zombie threats. Resource allocation becomes warfare. Who gets the last antibiotics? Who gets priority for food during shortages? Who's exempt from dangerous work details? Every decision creates winners and losers. Losers don't accept outcomes quietly when survival is at stake. They organize opposition, hoard resources, sabotage systems they feel excluded from. You get theft, violence, murder over supplies that could have been shared if trust existed. But trust requires security that scarcity destroys. Paranoia becomes rational. Anyone could be infected. Anyone could be hiding bites. Anyone could turn tonight and kill you in your sleep. That fear prevents community formation. People sleep in locked rooms with weapons. They refuse to share food or tools. They view neighbors as threats first, and allies never. The social cohesion required for organized defense falls apart when everyone suspects everyone else. Your island becomes a collection of individuals pretending to cooperate while planning betrayals. Crime spikes without law enforcement. Pre-outbreak social contracts break down. Who enforces rules? Who investigates theft? Who punishes violence? Most survivor groups lack formal justice systems. They improvise, which creates inconsistent enforcement that feels arbitrary. Arbitrary justice breeds resistance. Resistance requires suppression. Suppression requires force. Now you're running a police state on an island that's supposed to be a refuge. The irony doesn't matter. You're either enforcing order through violence or watching order dissolve into chaos. Both paths lead to casualties and internal weakening. Sexual violence emerges in lawless conditions. Isolated populations with collapsed social structures see predatory behavior increase. Victims can't escape to other communities. Law enforcement doesn't exist. Perpetrators act with impunity. This destroys group cohesion worse than resource scarcity because it creates permanent rifts between survivors who should be cooperating. Women arm themselves or form protective groups, further fracturing the population. Men face suspicion and isolation. The resulting gender tensions make coordinated defense nearly impossible. These social failures happen faster on islands than mainland scenarios. Mainland groups experiencing internal conflict can split into separate settlements miles apart. Islands force continued proximity. You're trapped seeing the people you hate every day. That constant friction accelerates violence and breakdown. Your island community implodes from internal pressure before zombies finish the job. Environmental vulnerabilities. Islands occupy the intersection of multiple environmental threat vectors that compound during apocalypse conditions. Storm systems that would be manageable pre-outbreak become extinction events when infrastructure fails and preparation is impossible. Hurricanes and typhoons hit tropical islands regularly. Category 3 and above storms generate surges that flood coastal areas and destroy structures. Pre-outbreak, you'd evacuate or shelter in reinforced buildings with emergency supplies. Post-outbreak, evacuation means boats you don't have fuel for, sailing into zombie-infested waters. Sheltering means hoping your improvised fortifications withstand winds that peel roofs off concrete buildings. Storm prep requires supplies you've already consumed. You can't board windows without plywood. You can't secure boats without rope and anchors. You can't stockpile food for aftermath when you're already rationing. Storm surge floods defensive positions. Your carefully constructed beach barricades wash away in 10-foot waves. Zombies floating offshore get carried inland by surge and deposited throughout the island. Your clean zones become contaminated. Your supply caches get destroyed. Your population disperses to high ground and can't reunite because floodwaters separate zones. When waters recede, you're rebuilding from scratch, while fighting zombies that the storm scattered everywhere. Tsunami risks destroy Pacific islands without warning. Undersea earthquakes generate waves that cross oceans in hours. You get maybe 30 minutes warning if you have working radio systems, which you probably don't. Tsunamis don't care about your defenses. 20-foot walls of water erase everything in the impact zone. Your population, supplies, and fortifications vanish. Survivors scattered to high ground have nothing left. The island didn't save you. It concentrated your resources in the exact zone that got destroyed. Rising sea levels compound over time. Climate change doesn't pause for zombie apocalypse. Oceans continue rising at 3 millimeters per year. That seems trivial until you calculate decade-long survival. 10 years equals 30 millimeters of rise. Low-lying atolls go from barely habitable to partially submerged. Beaches erode. Freshwater lenses get contaminated by saltwater intrusion. Islands that were marginal become uninhabitable not from zombies, but from basic geography. You survive the undead only to watch the ocean slowly drown your refuge. Volcanic activity threatens island chains built on tectonic hotspots. Hawaii, Iceland, Indonesia, all sitting on active geology. Eruptions that would be regional emergencies pre-outbreak become apocalyptic when evacuation is impossible and response systems don't exist. Lava flows flows destroy settlements. Ash clouds contaminate water and collapse structures. Gas emissions poison air. Your island refuge becomes a volcanic death trap with nowhere to run. Earthquakes collapse infrastructure you can't rebuild. Tropical islands along subduction zones face regular seismic activity. Quakes destroy buildings, rupture water systems, trigger landslides. Pre-outbreak, you'd have emergency services and reconstruction. Post-outbreak, you're manually digging survivors from rubble with no medical care for crush injuries. The island's geology actively works against your survival. These environmental factors create compound failure scenarios where one disaster triggers cascading others. Hurricane floods your defenses right before earthquake season. Volcanic eruption during storm season. Tsunami hits while you're weak from disease outbreak. Islands concentrate environmental vulnerabilities in ways mainland scenarios don't. You can't relocate from environmental threats when you're surrounded by ocean. Psychological breakdown. Human psychology isn't designed for permanent isolation under constant threat. Islands create mental health crises that destroy populations as effectively as zombies. Claustrophobia manifests even in outdoor spaces when you can't leave. The ocean becomes a wall more oppressive than concrete because you can see freedom you can't reach. Mainland is visible on clear days, close enough to taunt but too far to access safely. That proximity to escape you can't use drives people insane. They fixate on leaving, planning escape attempts that are obviously suicidal. Others sink into despair knowing they'll never leave the island alive. Both responses remove functional people from your survival population. Hypervigilance exhaustion destroys mental health. Constant alertness for zombie threats creates chronic stress. Your cortisol levels stay elevated for months. Sleep becomes impossible without sedation you don't have. People develop PTSD from combat and losses. Flashbacks, nightmares, emotional numbing. These aren't weaknesses. They're normal responses to abnormal sustained trauma, but they make people non-functional. They stop participating in defense. They stop contributing to resource gathering. They become liabilities requiring care from an already strained population. Hopelessness spreads through populations. When every day is survival with no prospect of improvement, people lose will to continue. Suicide rates spike. People walk into the ocean. People deliberately expose themselves to infection. People stop eating. You can force someone to survive short-term, but you can't force long-term will to live. Islands provide no narrative of hope. Mainland survival at least offers the fantasy of finding other communities, rebuilding civilization, discovering safe zones. Islands explicitly reject those possibilities. You're trapped on rock in the ocean until you die. That certainty crushes human psychology. Interpersonal relationships deteriorate under stress. Couples fight constantly. Families fracture. Friendships dissolve. The social bonds that provide psychological resilience fall apart when resources are scarce and futures are bleak. People who loved each other pre-outbreak become hostile strangers competing for survival. That loss of social support accelerates individual mental breakdown. Children suffer worst. Kids raised in apocalypse conditions with no memory of normal life develop severe psychological issues. They're stunted emotionally, unable to process trauma they've experienced since birth. They view constant violence and death as normal. They can't form healthy attachments. They're essentially feral by psychological metrics. These damaged children become damaged adults who can't maintain functional communities. Your island might survive one generation, but the next generation is psychologically incapable of continuing what you built. Generational trauma becomes permanent. Even if you physically survive on an island for decades, the psychological damage compounds through generations. Survivors pass trauma to children through parenting approaches and environmental conditioning. Those children pass amplified trauma to their children. Each generation becomes less functional, more damaged, less capable. Islands don't preserve humanity. They create psychologically destroyed populations that technically still breathe. The mental health crisis depletes your population through suicide, violence, and simple loss of function. People who could contribute stop contributing. People who could fight stop fighting. Your effective survival population shrinks even as total population stays static. The island hasn't killed you yet, but it's destroyed your ability to continue caring whether you live or die. Tactical failures. Islands seem defensible until you analyze actual combat scenarios. The water barrier that looks protective creates tactical vulnerabilities that competent zombie hordes exploit. Perimeter defense requires covering entire coastlines. Islands don't have single entry points like fortress gates. Every beach, every rocky shore, every shallow area is a potential landing zone. Zombies don't care about designated entry points. They arrive wherever ocean currents and seafloor topography deliver them. Defending 360 degrees of coastline requires manpower you don't have. You'd need constant patrols at minimum or observation posts at maximum. Both require personnel pulled from other survival tasks. You can't maintain full perimeter security long-term without exhausting your population. Concentrated defense positions create gaps. You could choose strategic points to fortify and accept that other areas stay undefended. But that means zombies will land in undefended zones and penetrate inland before you detect them. Your fortified positions become irrelevant when threats bypass them entirely. Islands force a choice between thin coverage everywhere or strong coverage somewhere. Neither option works against threats that arrive unpredictably across entire coastlines. Zombie detection in water is nearly impossible. Submerged zombies approach invisibly. Surface floating zombies blend with debris and waves at distance. You don't know zombies are arriving until they're walking out of the surf. That's zero warning time, no preparation, no mobilization. Your defenders react instead of respond. Reactive defense always suffers higher casualties than proactive defense. Elevation advantages disappear on flat islands. Atolls and coral islands have maximum elevations of 10 to 20 feet. That's no defensive height. You can't rain projectiles down on approaching zombies. You can't create killing fields with overlapping fire lanes. You're fighting on flat ground where zombies' numerical advantage matters more. The geography that was supposed to protect you provides zero tactical benefit. Limited retreat options create last stand scenarios. Mainland defense allows falling back to secondary positions when primary lines fail. Islands don't have strategic depth. There's nowhere to retreat. Once zombies breach your beach defenses, you're fighting in your living areas with civilians mixed in. Combat becomes chaotic. Friendly fire increases. Zombies kill non-combatants who can't evacuate. Your population takes catastrophic casualties from single breach events. Ammunition scarcity forces melee combat. Once bullets run out, you're fighting zombies with hand weapons. Melee against undead is mathematically suicidal. Every engagement creates exposure risk. Zombie bites or blood spray during melee transmit infection. You can kill 10 zombies in melee and get infected from the 11th. Your combat effectiveness collapses when ammunition depletes, because humans can't sustain prolonged melee against superior numbers. These tactical realities mean islands can't be defended long term. You're fighting battles you can't win repeatedly until attrition destroys your capability. The island didn't save you. It trapped you in an unwinnable tactical scenario. Long-term sustainability. Even assuming you survive initial outbreaks, refugee crises, and tactical engagements, islands fail on sustainability timelines. Self-sufficiency requires resources and knowledge most survivor groups lack. Agriculture on islands faces multiple constraints. Limited arable land reduces crop yields. Tropical soils are often nutrient poor, requiring fertilizers you don't have. Freshwater for irrigation is scarce. Salt spray damages crops. Storms destroy seasons of work. You're farming in hard mode with no margin for error. One bad season means starvation. 2 consecutive bad seasons means population collapse. Genetic diversity in crops and livestock diminishes over time. You brought limited seed varieties and few animals. Inbreeding reduces vigor in both plants and livestock. Disease sweeps through genetically similar populations faster. Your food production becomes increasingly fragile as years pass. One blight could eliminate your entire crop. One livestock disease could kill all your animals. You're creating agricultural vulnerabilities that compound annually. Tool and equipment degradation creates cascading failures. Metal tools rust in salt air. Plastic degrades in UV exposure. Electronics fail without replacement parts. Every material object on the island is slowly deteriorating. You can't manufacture replacements for complex tools. When your last axe breaks, you're processing wood with sharp rocks. When your last knife dulls beyond repair, you're butchering with shells. Your technological capability regresses to Stone Age over decades. Medical knowledge loss happens when older survivors die. Anyone with medical training becomes irreplaceable. When they die, you lose surgical capability, diagnostic ability, treatment knowledge. Younger generations learn what they're taught, but complex medical procedures can't transfer through verbal instruction alone. Your healthcare capability degrades with each generation until you're treating infections with prayer. Educational collapse follows resource scarcity. You can't maintain schools when children need to work for survival. Literacy drops. Mathematical ability vanishes. Scientific knowledge disappears. Each generation knows less than the previous. Your island population becomes progressively less capable over time. The skills that enabled your survival aren't passed to descendants effectively enough to maintain them. Social knowledge about cooperation and governance gets lost. The people who remember democratic systems die. The people who remember rule of law die. Later generations only know autocratic survival structures they were raised in. They can't rebuild functional societies because they've never experienced them. Your island creates generational decline where each new cohort is less capable of maintaining civilization than their parents. These sustainability failures mean islands can't host human populations long-term even without zombie threats. You're creating conditions that guarantee collapse over decades. The question isn't whether your island community fails, it's which failure mode kills you first. The final calculation. When you compile every factor, arrival mechanisms, resource constraints, social collapse, environmental threats, psychological damage, tactical vulnerabilities, and sustainability failures, the conclusion is mathematical. Islands cannot support human survival in zombie apocalypse scenarios. The initial appeal is a trap. Water barriers provide days or weeks of protection maximum before the first zombie arrives, or the first refugee brings infection. After that initial grace period, every advantage becomes a disadvantage. The isolation that seemed protective prevents resupply. The boundaries that seemed defensive trap you in fixed positions. The community that seemed safe fractures under pressure. The environment that seemed paradisiacal actively works to kill you. Islands concentrate every apocalypse failure mode in compressed geography while removing escape options. You're creating pressure cookers programmed to explode. The only question is timing. Small islands with large refugee populations fail in days. Remote islands with small prepared populations might last months. Well-defended islands with sustainable resources could potentially last years. But they all fail eventually because the fundamental equation doesn't balance. Islands can't produce what populations need to survive long-term. They can't defend against persistent threats indefinitely. They can't maintain human psychology under permanent isolation and stress. The mathematical certainty of island failure makes them perfect narrative devices, but terrible survival strategies. Anyone planning zombie apocalypse survival using islands is planning to die with ocean views. The calculation is simple. Water doesn't stop zombies. Islands don't produce resources. Isolation doesn't preserve humanity. Survival requires mobility, resource access, and sustainable communities. Islands provide none of those things. They provide the illusion of safety that kills you slowly while you watch the horizon and wait for the inevitable. If you enjoyed this video and want to see why you can't survive World War Z zombies, click the video on screen.